Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sujata and team for inviting me to talk here. And today, being the National Epilepsy Day, it is a good opportunity to make the doctors aware regarding the various treatment options for the pediatric patients who have intractable epilepsy. So today I'll be focusing on about the role of vagus nerve stimulation for pediatric patients with intractable epilepsy. So I thank Mr. Samir, who is the marketing manager of LivaNova. He has sent some scientific content for this presentation. So I'll be basically talking about the introduction to drug-resistant epilepsy. Then I'll be talking about the various non-surgical treatment options available for drug-resistant epilepsy. Then I'll be talking about the surgical interventions possible, VNS therapy, what is it and how it works, VNS therapy in pediatric epilepsy, and then I'll be talking about a case study. So first, coming to introduction to drug-resistant epilepsy. Epilepsy, as you all know very well, it's a global issue. There are approximately about 50 million people with epilepsy who are living worldwide, and approximately 5 million new people are diagnosed with epilepsy each year. In the high-income countries, the annual cases is about 49 per 1 lakh people in general population, and 80% of the people with epilepsy live in the low to medium income countries, and where unfortunately the availability of drugs is very minimal. So less than 50% there are generic AEDs available. So the first and foremost treatment for any patient, be it the child or adult with epilepsy, is medications. There are antiepileptic drugs which are easily available, widely available, which can be safely taken by both adults and children. They mainly have 4 goals. First is being to eliminate seizures or reduce the frequency of seizures. Second being to evade the adverse effects associated with long-term use. And third is that aid patient in maintaining or restoring their usual psychosocial and vocational activities. And the first and fourth, last is the aid patients in maintaining a normal lifestyles. So the therapy decision should balance these factors to provide optimal seizure relief. At the same time, the quality of life should be maintained. So, but unfortunately, despite the more than 50 drugs being available in the market, and with new drugs being discovered every year, what has not changed, we see that despite all this medication, there are still a large number of patients who fail to respond to medicines. So if you can see that this was one of the earliest studies, which is a landmark study by Kwan. They found that in about 57.3%, there's approximately 60% of patients respond to first or second antiepileptic drug, but 43% still tend to have seizures despite taking medicines. There's some disturbance in the background. Mute all. Yeah. Okay, fine. So thing is that if you see that the statistics here, if you look at the statistics in focal epilepsy, we find that it's the proportion of patients who are drug resistant is almost 60%. So nearly 2/3 of the patients with focal epilepsies have drug resistant epilepsy, and with general epilepsy it's lesser but still significant, 20 to 40%. So based on this, the ILE in 2010, it has coined a definition for drug resistant epilepsy. The other terms which were used, medical refractory, pharmacoresistant, medical ineffective, but all of them is the same. It means that the failure of adequate trials of 2 tolerated and appropriately chosen drugs, either monotherapies or combination, to achieve sustained seizure freedom. So here the interval which the IL recommends for adults is 2 years and children it's 1 year. Because in children, the seizure control is more important, because if not, it will affect the development and cognition. So when the 2 drugs have failed for 2 years adults and 1 year in children, we'll label them as drug resistant. So what are the consequences of these uncontrolled seizures? So with uncontrolled seizures, there are certain well-recognized issues which we all know, mainly because of physical, psychological, and societal consequences of epilepsy, and also drug burden being high, and also it predisposes them to increased mortality. So some of the well-recognized issues which are there with uncontrolled epilepsy is depression, anxiety, increased mortality and morbidity, increased healthcare utilization, adverse effects with long-term AED use, and cognitive impairment and seizure-related injuries. And also it affects their impaired ability to work, keep a full-time job, develop a mental social relations, remain in education, establish families and drive. So you can see there are a lot of consequences because of drug and epilepsy, not just which are beyond seizures. So one of the most direct complications in these people who have uncontrolled epilepsy is SUDEP, which stands for sudden unexpected death of someone with epilepsy who was otherwise healthy. And this is commonly seen in 1 in 1,000 children, adults with epilepsy, but it is more common in children and also more common in patients who have uncontrolled seizures. So it can be 1 in 250 also. So almost 4 times higher is than in patients with well-controlled seizures. So that is for this reason, it is important that we evaluate and treat the patient who have uncontrolled epilepsy or drug resistant at the earliest. So first and foremost, first step is to confirm whether epilepsy is there. And we have to rule out other mimickers of seizures, mainly like convulsive syncope, psychogenic non-epileptic events, pain reaction, dissociative states, etc. And confirm seizure type by doing investigations, which most common we do is long-term EEG and MRI. These are the two foremost investigations which help to confirm seizure type and diagnosis also. And based on that, what treatment to be given should be decided. So here, similar what we know, in commonly in cardiac, they say that time is heart, and even stroke, time is brain. Similarly, in epilepsy also, the concept of time is brain holds good. Because the earlier we identify, earlier we treat a patient, better are the outcomes. And the lower is the risk of them having adverse effects because epilepsy, adverse effects due to medicines, and the lower is the incidence of SUDEP. So it enables the people to resume their normal lives and overall quality of life better than compared to those who are taking medicines and having uncontrolled seizures. So there are certain beyond when the drugs fails, the first and foremost are the non-surgical options which are available. The options include ketogenic diet, cannabinoids, and neurostimulation, which is non-invasive. So just to mention, I'll be just focusing about the neuromedicine here. So variations of there are various non-invasive neuromedicine available. The 4 main modalities are transcutaneous vagus nerve, where we implant in the stimulant device in the auricle. So it stimulates the auricular branch of the vagus nerve. Other will be a transcutaneous direct stimulation, where we place the anode and cathode on the patient's forehead. Then other is a trigeminal nerve stimulation, which again is patient's forehead, and it stimulates the ophthalmic trigeminal nerve. And transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, which is nowadays widely being used by using electromagnetic pulses to deploy the cortical tissue. So, but despite multiple non-invasive modalities being available, although they appear to be well tolerated, there's currently insufficient data about to suggest efficacy or support their use. So herein lies the treatment gap. So whilst there are many promising non-surgical options available, there are still limitations to each approach. Ketogenic diet, as we all know, widely used in children, but the adherence is the issue, especially in Indian population, where this diet following is very difficult. It has been successfully in South Asian countries like Japan, South Korea, etc. But in Indian people, we find it difficult. Then second being cannabinoid treatment presents a high rate of adverse effects, and it is not widely available in India. And regards to the non-invasive devices, I told data is currently insufficient. And with regards to genetic gene therapy, there is still uncertainty regarding the immunogenicity when expressing a foreign protein with optogenetic or chemogenetic therapies. So it is still unclear. So herein the role of surgical interventions play a role. So surgical treatment approaches, there are basically 3 main modalities. Resective, when the main surgical treatment is the main treatment choice for drug resistant epilepsy. Second being palliative. Palliative is for those patients who are ineligible for other surgical treatments or they have failed surgical treatment. And third is the minimally invasive. Minimally invasive are the techniques which are available to reduce the risk of surgical complications, especially deficits associated surgery. So there are 3 modalities which are available for treatment. So the commonest surgical therapies which are done include anterior-temporal lobectomy, which has outcomes of about 60 to 80% of seizure freedom. Hemispherectomy, where the deficit of the seizure onset is over the large hemisphere. The outcomes again are very good, up to 77% seizure freedom. And sometimes extratemporal epilepsies like frontal, occipital, parietal. These are like suboptimal outcomes compared to them, but still the outcomes are around 60%. And palliative are majorly where we cannot do a completely curation surgery, but we can do surgeries for preventing the seizures which are most disabling. The most disabling here are drop attacks, which are done, reduced by calcitomy. It has good therapeutic effect, but there are high rate of post-operative complications, especially in children. You commonly encounter them to have disconnection syndromes. And other modalities which are available in the Western countries include MRI-guided laser therapy. So this is mainly used for small lesions which are there. The outcomes they say is roughly about 60-70%, but so far it's not been done in India. So this was a landmark trial comparing the surgical and the medical arms in patients who had temporal epilepsy. So we can see that overall, both in patients who had undergone surgery fared significantly better than those who did not undergo surgery. So you can clearly say that overall in patients with temporal epilepsy, surgical who are refractory to medicines, surgical therapy fares much better over the medical therapy. And with regards to even children, this was another study which shows that which was from Dwivedi et al., which clearly shows that for patients with drug-resistant epilepsy in children, surgical therapy fares far better than medical therapy. But unfortunately, despite the evidence, still there is a big treatment gap between the number of people who need to undergo surgery for epilepsy and the number of cases being done. So you can see that the estimates vary from 5% to 50% depending on the territories, and only a small minority of potential surgical candidates will have access to evaluation. This is further big gap. And the patients who undergo surgery after the time required is the delay you can see is as much as 25 years. So between the time interval recommended is 2 years, but here delay is 25 years on average. So we can see that approximately about 1.5 to 1.6% only of eligible patients undergo surgery in US and Canada. In India, it is much higher than that. We can say approximately the number of people with statistical who undergo surgery in India is only 500-600 per year. Actually, we need to undergo nearly 2 lakhs. So there is a huge gap between the number of people who need to undergo and actually undergo surgery for epilepsy in India. So this is because this gap is due to various reasons. First and foremost, there are limited resources dedicated to the pre-surgical evaluation, like video EEG, MRI, and all are not easily available in the peripheries. And the main thing is the fear. This fear is by the patients themselves and by the doctors who are not aware about the epilepsy surgeries being there. So patients have fear that after they get undergo surgery, they have permanent deficits. And the long term we have data so far available is for 10 years, but beyond that there is no much data available. So patients always cast guarantee, but that one we can say that up to 10 years, but beyond that no one knows. And secondly, medicines majority of the patients can be reduced, but completely stopping is there is no definite guarantee for that. And obviously for undergoing surgery, we need certain surgical expertise. So we need certain surgeons who are trained in epilepsy surgery, which are far and few in India. And lack of effective RCTs demonstrating efficacy of surgery or AEDs, although there are few available, but this is still another thing which needs to be come up in the future. So VNS therapy is alternative options for patients who are not candidates for surgery. So this is because the epileptic focus remains unidentified, so it may be diffuse focus, we don't know from where it's coming in the brain, or it may be located in very eloquent areas for which surgery may not be possible. So in addition, side effect of this kind of surgery, which like mainly epilepsy surgery, can be significant. Like patients with temporal epilepsy can have memory issues, frontal lobe epilepsy can have sometimes limb weakness, parietal lobe again can have limb weakness. For this reason, and patients having fear of surgery, this VNS offers a less invasive option, aiming to modulate neural activity of deep brain areas, which and it's an effective procedure for patients who are not surgical candidates. So when do you consider VNS is a question. So first and foremost, and a patient who is having a structural pathology in MRI and who is surgically amenable, the commonest, as I told, is temporal epilepsy, which is a mesial temporal, or it can be neocortical, which are unilateral on one side. But sometimes patient can have bitemporal in both temporal lobes. It may be multifocal, arising from various areas in the brain, or even generalized like Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. These are the ones we cannot do a surgery for curation. So in these patients, and even certain proportion of patients who are generalized epilepsies, who are cryptogenic or idiopathic, about 20%, those are the ones also in whom surgical option is not possible. But then in these patients, VNS is a good option for use for them. So VNS is a safety profile which has been demonstrated by RCTs, and it has very mild side effects. So they are typically to stimulation and normally and temporary. Over time, settle down. The commonest ones are paresthesias, increased cough, dyspnea, pharyngitis, hoarseness of voice, swallowing difficulties, and worsening of asthma and bronchitis are reported. These are commonest in adults. In children, we see minimal side effects because the children, the vagus nerve is not myelinated. So children usually tolerate very well higher doses of battery stimulation than adults, and the side effects like cough and all are rarely seen in children. So other somatic side effects like sleep apnea have been theoretically reported. And in patients who have undergone bilateral or left cervical vagotomy, unipolar diathermy, or patients with cardiac arrhythmias which are meaningful, this again VNS should be in caution. This is then we implant on the left side so that the right side which supplies the cardiac conduction is not affected. So what is venous therapy and how it works? So venous therapy is a simple thing. It's a pulse generator that is implanted, you can see, under the skin and connected to left vagus nerve in the carotid sheath. So it is recommended for therapy for reducing seizure frequency in children and adults who are not surgical candidates. So the components of venous therapy, there are four main components. First of all is the generator, which are various devices available. The latest being Sentiva.
Meeting 8:15.
So there are various therapies available which are there. The earliest being the biggest one, like there was pulse, and then came to demi-pulse, and now we have the ones which are auto stimulation, which include the Aspire and Sentiva, and they are basically placed anchored around the vagus nerve. You can see this is the illustrative figure, and then there's a vent and programmer which are used for programming after device is implanted, and then is magnet. These are the four devices which are there for VNS. So the modes of therapy include a normal mode, which is where the time interval is fixed. Like usually we keep about 30 seconds on and 5 minutes off to begin with. So every 30 seconds it gives a pulse. Every 5 minutes it gives a pulse for 30 seconds. This is the normal mode, and this occurs round the clock, 24 hours in a day. So every 5 minutes the 30-second pulse is given by default. And apart from that, there are other devices which are auto stimulation, which sense the heart rate. So this what they give is that apart from that 5 minutes 30-second pulse, in between a patient has seizure, they sense the change in the heart rate, and they give auto stimulation in between, so that in between seizures happening they can be aborted. And patient has a magnet mode, which patient, if they have aura, or the bystanders, if they notice the patient having seizures, they can sometimes stimulate manually to give additional dose. So the magnet provides on-demand stimulation or temporary suspend stimulation. So it may be useful for patient families if they have a aura or they have a brief complex procedure before generalization. So it can be used by the swiping, like a swiping across the chest wall to give a stimulation, and it can be used for both things, for avoiding seizures if they have persistent auras. It may reduce the severity of seizures and improve the post-hospital period. And also if the patient has side effects, it can be used for stopping stimulation also. So this magnet helps in reducing the benefit of nearly 45% of the patients, and also the termination notice of nearly 20%, nearly 1/3 of patients have termination of seizures after taking magnet. So how does venous therapy work? So venous therapy delivers an anticonvulsive effect via multiple pathways. The main three pathways on which this venous therapy acts are, first and foremost, is the regulation of neurotransmitter expression. So venous therapy has been found to alter the transmission by increasing the release of noradrenaline, GABA, and serotonin, and reducing the excitatory transmitter aspartate. So it increases the inhibitory neurotransmitters and reduces the excitatory transmitter aspartate. And also it affects the cerebral blood flow by increasing blood flow to thalamus and cortex, which play a role in seizure regulation. And also in the EEG, VNS is found to be effective by causing desynchronization. So desynchronization helps in reducing the electrical discharges and thereby exerting anticonvulsive effect. So as you know that this vagus nerve via the cervical branch which implant, the impulses go via the textus solitarius, and they regulate the release of noradrenaline, which has been found to have anti-epileptic effect. And other than that, studies also shown that, as I told earlier, GABA receptor density measured by SPECT has been found to be increased in patients who undergone VNS. VNS upregulates the release of GABA. And as I told earlier, this desynchronizes the spikes. So interhemispheric gamma band synchronization increases, and duration of spike intervals also increases, and it reduces the interictal spike duration, and spike activity. So by these various mechanisms, venous therapy has been a safe option, which can be predictive against partial and generalized seizures. So when patients undergo venous therapy, they reduced enhanced seizure control and improved outcomes when treated early. And also the outcomes are sustained over time, and the seizure recovery and seizure severity is reduced, and seizure recovery time is increased. And overall, over time, it significantly improves the quality of life. And also, not only that, it improves significantly the mental functioning, mood, and behavior. So this is another good effect of VNS. It improves the patient's mood, especially in children who have hyperactivity, behavior issues, and cognitive disturbances. VNS is found to have a role in improving the mental functioning in children. So coming to venous therapy in pediatric epilepsy. So what we have found, what their studies have found is that about 0.5 to 1% of pediatric population have epilepsy, and up to 1 in 3 children, that is roughly nearly 30% of children with epilepsy have drug-resistant epilepsy. So severe epilepsy during developmental period is detrimental to intellectual and social maturation, and repeated seizures in children can lead to neuropsychological impairment, leading to impaired cognition and also behavioral abnormalities. So children with epilepsy compared to adults are greater risk of academic underachievement with specific deficit in areas related to listening, learning, attention, concentration, organizational skills, and memory. So many children with epilepsy suffer intellectual behavior problems that can contribute to their illnesses and may constitute major disability. And the behavior problems associated with childhood epilepsies are more serious than would be expected on the basis of chronic illness alone. So these are commonly ignored by patients. They just believe, family members, they just believe that the child is actually hyperactive, but sometimes they can have underlying epilepsy which is responsible there, and also plus added effects of drugs which are going, which can cause behavior issues. So clinical evidence for pediatric venous therapy. In 1994, venous therapy was approved in Europe for treatment of drug-resistant epilepsy. So initial randomized studies were time limited, 3 months follow-up, and demonstrated nearly about 25 to 30% of reduction in seizure frequency. And subsequently, in 2017, venous therapy was approved by the FDA for treatment of drug-resistant epilepsy in children who are more than 4 years of age. So venous therapy is suitable for pediatric use. The devices used are very small and compact, which are available. So this DemiPulse is one of the commonest devices which is used. It is without any auto stimulation, but it is found to be very effective in seizure control. And personally, we have used this device in about 3 patients. So in this, what usually this volume is less and lighter, so that the children do not feel the heaviness, and it can suit children in small ears. So overall, it results in better seizure control, can facilitate developmental progress, and improve cognition. And the latest one is Sentiva. This is the smallest and lightest responsive therapy for drug-resistant epilepsy. This is the advantage of auto stimulation. Plus, also we can set a timing during which we use. So that some children have some clusters in the early morning hours, like when they're in deep sleep or early morning, they have clustering. So that the programming can be set accordingly, so that the on time can be more during that cluster time, and rest of the time the programming can be less. So this is the latest therapy which is available, which is a very compact device and lightest device which is available and can be used in children. So children receiving venous therapy have fewer shorter seizures. So overall, the studies have shown that 48% of children had seizure reduction, 42% had seizure severity reduction, 40% had severe reduction in the post severity, and the responder rate was about 63% in patients who had no change in the concomitant medication. So you can see that it works very well with the other 2 medicines when venous therapy is used. So the main thing is that it reduces the seizure burden in children. Mainly, if you see that about nearly follow-up of nearly 50% the minimum first 6 months, and up to 2 years, 60% reduction is there. And one more thing is that no difference in efficacy is seen in between children younger than 12 years and older. So it can be used safely in children. And in children, it is used earlier the better. So this study shows that if the children VNS who are under seizures, VNS therapy was done less than 10 years, responded better than those who have done after 10 years. So time is brain in VNS2, the earlier the better. And again, another study shows that the quality of life is much better when it was done early on. So if it is done within the first nearly about 30 months, as early as 3 months after seizure become uncontrolled in children, the outcomes in terms of quality of life are much better compared to when it is done later on. And also it is effective long-term option. If you see that the follow-up of nearly 48 months is there. So studies have found that consistent reduction of seizure freedom, seizure frequency or severity by nearly about 40 to 55% in various studies. And also the need for hospitalization in the long-term expenditure also, and the risk of threat to life by status epilepticus is reduced by about 70% in patients who undergo VNS. And it's effective in various types of seizures, like mainly in LGS, it is the commonest indication where it is used. So it reduces significantly the frequency of myoclonic, generalized tonic-clonic, atypical absence tonic. Atonic also it reduces, but comparatively the outcomes are little lesser in this study, but we have found good effectiveness of even atonic also. So main thing is that this devices I told you earlier, this significantly reduce the seizure severity and improve the seizure recovery. So not only the ictal period, the ictal severity and the recovery in the post-ictal period is significantly faster, and the seizure are less severe. And if you see that in epileptic encephalopathies, these children do very well. Surgery, obviously, if there is some treatable lesion found, they are the best option. But when they're not amenable to surgery, in certain epileptic encephalopathies, compared to medical therapy, this palliative surgery like VNS has a good outcomes. And you can see that not only the seizure freedom, even developmental quotient is significantly better when in the surgical arm compared to medical arm. So VNS, you can see that when VNS therapy was done or chelostomy was done in patients who had epileptic encephalopathies, the outcomes were significantly improved by almost 34.8% compared to those on medical therapy. So follow-up improved from 31 in the beginning to 34 after procedure. So you can see that overall in medical it declines from 34% to 29%. So benefits for VNS therapy for pediatric patients is that it reduces seizure freedom, better seizure control, and can provide long-term seizure control, and the number of hospital visits is significantly reduced. To summarize, in nearly about 0.5 to 1% pediatric population epilepsy, up to 1/3 of children with epilepsy are drug resistant. The consequences of untreated pediatric drug-resistant epilepsy include cognitive behavioral disturbances, which can contribute significantly to illness and disability. And VNS therapy has been found to be have a good long-term efficacy for children aged 18 years or younger. So as early as 4 years is the FDA approved thing. And early VNS therapy implantation in children leads to better outcomes. Better seizure control can facilitate development progress, improve cognitive outcomes, and raise quality of life. And VNS therapy also reduces healthcare utilization with fewer hospital days, emergency room visits, and hospitalization. And over time, children therapy, VNS therapy and assisted surgery have better outcomes compared to medicines in terms of development, quotient, and seizure-free survival. So just to do, before winding up, I'll just show one case which we had done recently. So it's a 6-year-old child from West Bengal who had studied seizures from 2 years of age. She had no aura. Ictus was suddenly drop attacks. She was already on 4 medicines and prior to that, she already tried another 4 medicines. So MRI showed bilateral pathology. She had bilateral posterior pachygyria, but IQ and all was good, and speech and all was good. So in view of these options, we have drop attacks. There are 2 options, which were chelostomy or VNS. We opted for VNS because the child IQ and all was good, and if we do this discontinued procedures in children which have good IQ, sometimes it can cause significant disability which are permanent. So before procedure, the child could not stand without support, and this was a seizure which was there. The video EG. So this was the drop attacks which were there. So she used to have multiple times, almost nearly half an hour once she used to have these drop attacks, and for that reason she could not even sit without support. So this was the intra images. You can see that around the vagus nerve nicely. This the device is coiled around the vagus nerve. And this is the after seizure, after surgery, she has significantly improved, and she is now able to walk independently and even plays around. So this is just an image she is sharing now. So you can see that she is able to even play on the ball and walk around and all that. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Thank you so much, Dr. Kenny. And I think the last video just kind of nails it for us to say that, how important it is for us pediatricians to make sure that we identify these and refer early and ensure that the child's normalcy is returned as soon as possible. So thank you very much. We'll open the questions to everyone else. If not, I will start asking questions. So my question is, what is our experience in Aster Group? How have we done? And what is the pathway of referral? How do we go about?
Yeah, in the last year, totally in Aster, we have done 4 VNS, the youngest being about 1.5-year-old child, and the eldest being we have done is a 16-year-old child. So the pathway of referral was basically it was referred to us initially by a pediatrician who referred to a neurologist, and subsequently the neurologist referred here. And some of them were referred directly to neurosurgery department. Dr. Dhananjay Bhatt sir, he had 2 patients were directly referred to him, and then he worked with me, and then we could do these 2 cases here. So one of 2 have were walk-ins, and then we worked up. So I think majority of the referrals are basically from the mainly by the neurosurgery department, and also by some awareness which we have created by social media. That has been the pathway so far for these 4 patients we have done so far. But all of them are doing very well, especially the 2 children who are especially that 4-year-old child, and even that 1.5-year Kinnan, 2 years child Kinnan, who we have come across recently. They are the ones who have significantly done better. Their drop attacks are reduced, the spasms are reduced, significantly done better. Even the adults also are faring very well. So far we have done. Adults means they are adolescent, 14-year and 16-year-old children. They are also doing very well. So this is a good option. It's unfortunately it is a lot of it's underutilized in India. Not much awareness about this is there, but whatever from our experience, it has been found to have good outcomes in terms not only of seizure freedom, the medicine reduction, and also the cognitive aspects also are much better by this VNS therapy.
Thank you. I think Sindhu has one question. Go for it, Sindhu.
Ma'am, I'm in lift. Can you just repeat, because I won't be able to talk.
Okay. So basically the question is, will they be, what are the chances of them being drug-free post this VNS? I knew you dealt with it in the talk.
Yeah, I think drug-free is less, but definitely we can reduce the medicines. If patients are on 4 medicines, we can at least come down on 2 medicines, or even if there are 2 medicines, we can come down on 1 medicine. That is what is there. So it is VNS is as effective as 3 drugs. That one you can say. As effective 3 drugs, you can say. That's what is there. So we can come down on the number of drugs, and that is the reason the side effect profile with the medicines and the cognitive aspects can be minimalized by using these things, the device.
I'm just curious, Dr. Kinney, what are our challenges in actually getting, patients for VNS? Where are we, in terms of?
So as I told you, the main thing is the referral. The referral is the main issue. People, as I come across majority, hardly, there are many neurologists. Pediatricians will be keen to refer, definitely. But they first go to the primary neurologist, but they try to put them on 3 drugs, 4 drugs, keep on changing, and they try various drugs. But then from that pediatrician, from the neurologist to come to our epilepsy unit, that is the hindrance. Neurosurgeons, I'm sure they'll be referring, even pediatricians will be referring, but the point of contact is that from the neurologist who should be the main ones to refer to epileptologist or to the epilepsy center where this person, they are the ones who don't refer. So this is one big lag, in the corporate setup. But if we can maybe do some screening health camps, and if we have the Aster volunteers that is there, whatever that currently recently that the Aster Sick Kids Foundation, and recently 2 days back that program has come. So if we can maybe do that and conduct some health camps, definitely we'll get a lot of patients who can be benefited. So main thing is this awareness to the public about the procedures available by doing various like TV talks or other social media or newspaper articles, or even health camps for this, so that they are aware regarding the importance of early referral for surgery, and even to the pediatrician if we conduct regular programs with the maybe with the IAP or that we have a center here which is we have where facilities are available. Definitely, we'll get more referrals and even patient will benefit from that. And even I think Mr. Samir is there. He is the marketing manager of LivaNova. He said that they have a charitable trust where for the unaffordable patients they are ready to give 1 or 2 devices in a year if we can reach a MOU with them. So are not affordable and all. There are some devices which they are ready to give at a very cheap rate or even at a minimal cost to the hospital.
That's very reassuring. Thank you. I was just wondering that we probably need to approach some of the schools as well, where these children may be attached to, and especially the special schools and all of that,
Correct.
to try and see if there are children something similar, then we just kind of screen
And
them
even I
there
think
as well.
if there is a chapter, I mean, if you know some chapter with, I mean, local chapter for epilepsy or something, that one either in this nearby Bangalore or nearby villages,
Sure.
that will be definitely helping.
Okay, we'll work on that one. Okay. I think there are a few questions on the chat box. Do you mind just having a quick look?
Yeah. So the next question is that with VNS development, can they be drug free? That's why I already answered. The cost, I mean, the cost here depends on the device which is available. So the surgery is not the cost here, but the device is the one which is there. So so for the device, the basic device, the starts from maybe approximately about 5.5 lakhs onwards. The basic device which is done. But I mean, the LivaNova company have been helping with us with who are patients who are not affordable with reducing the cost and all. They help in that. So that can be done. And even they told that some patients they are ready to even give some devices free also. So adverse effects with VNS, as I told, there are very majority are very minimal. In children, usually as such, the main issue is the swallowing problem and hoarseness, which may be there, which is usually temporary, and can be easily adjusted by reducing the initially pulse amplitude or the duration. Can be initially intensity of the battery can be kept low in the beginning, and the pulse with what is there can be set low. That usually settles down over time. And children, because the vagus nerve is not myelinated, this especially in young children, these side effects are very minimal. What advice do you give advice parents when they see sleep apnea? So sleep apnea in children can be, I mean, central sleep apnea and all. It is difficult to patients to make a parent to see actually, unless we do a proper sleep study and suspect the sleep apnea. It is difficult to. Adults also find adults at least compare some snoring or some somnolence in daytime. In children, first of all, to find this sleep apnea is difficult. But unless you have some children who have some stridor in sleep or that kind of thing. So the first and foremost, you should find out whether they have some secondary causes, like in children, they should show ENT, tubular adenoids, tonsillitis, hypertrophic tonsils, and all, which can cause. And obviously, their obesity to reduce. And if then they can do a sleep study and confirm. And then based on that, I think probably the CPAP or the BiPAP can be planned. With regards to VNS, it's a theoretical complication, but I have not come across any patient so far, at least who had this complication. I think that's it in the checkbox. That's all.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and it was a very enlightening talk for all of us. I think for us pediatricians, some of the key messages is basically to make sure that we identify, we understand drug-resistant epilepsy is nearly like seen in like 30% of the epileptics. So it's important to just make early referral to ensure that their quality of life is, well maintained. The next thing which is my take home is how to make sure that this message reaches to the right people and then they benefit from it. So thank you so much, Dr. Kenny, for your time and a wonderful talk. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.